Okay, maybe spend like another minute on this one and then we'll, or maybe less. It looks like nobody's working on it. All right, cool. Let's go over both of these quick. And if you didn't get them done, that's okay. I just thought it'd be good to kind of give you like a little, these are like multiple choice level test, final test problems that could like are good gauges as far as difficulty goes. So if you don't have it down yet, then you might definitely want to review Monopoly. Okay, so we have a demand curve and a marginal cost curve shown in the graph. There are no fixed costs. Okay, that's a little bit of a weird statement right there. I'm going to underline it because I'm thinking, okay, I don't know what that means exactly right now, but it's clearly something that's in here. If the industry is a single price monopoly, okay, single price monopoly, the book uses that term. I haven't used it much in lecture, but that just means monopoly. For the most part, how we're thinking about it. The monopolist marginal revenue curve would be MR. Okay, so we're given the marginal revenue curve, we're given the demand curve, given the marginal cost curve, and then we're asked about what the profits are. Well, the last thing that we need for profits, right, are what? If we want to figure out profits, we need demand, marginal revenue, marginal cost. One more thing. Okay, we can figure out the price though from the marginal rev from the first three things that I just said. Average total cost. Okay, so we need to figure out what's the average total cost here. And the hint that we're given is there are no fixed costs. Okay, so if there are no fixed costs, the marginal cost is equal to the average total cost. Okay. Now that's like, wait, we never went over that, but that's something that if you understand the concepts of what we're talking about, hopefully should be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, because if there's no fixed costs, then there's no like, the only thing that's changing for every unit is the variable cost, which is then just the average total cost, average variable cost, and the marginal costs are all equal to each other. Okay. And so this is a commonly, especially if you go take 410, this is a commonly made assumption to make problems easier. Just say there are no fixed costs, draw the marginal costs, because we don't want to talk about a bunch of different cost curves. Okay. So that's why I wanted to give this example here. I actually pulled it from another thing. Yeah, anyways, so if we know that, then we know the four things that we need to get profit, because first we need to solve for the quantity, then we need to solve for the price, then we can find the profit, right? So how do I find what quantity the monopoly is going to choose? Or any firm. Yeah, John.
It's like where
yep, the quantity, the profit maximizing quantity for any firm is going to be where marginal revenue equals marginal costs. Okay, so that's going to be this quantity I here. How do we find out what the price is going to be? Yeah, say yep, find where the quantity hits the demand curve. Okay, commonly we call it QM, but you could call it QXAZVWP, whatever you want. QM just seems to make sense, right? Because it's a monopoly. Okay, so we have QM, find where it hits the demand curve. I'm going to draw this in a different color. Okay, it hits the demand curve at F. So we can go over to our price, which is going to be right here. So our price is B, okay? So the price the monopolist pays is, or gets is B. And then we know that it's the price minus the average total cost for each unit that gets sold, right? So it's going to be this rectangle here, which is BFEH, okay, and that's also known as BFHE, so it's the second answer. Okay, any questions about that? Yeah. Okay, so let me think for a sec here. I mean, I guess the answer is sort of. Usually we don't think about producer surplus when we, I mean, if you say that the marginal cost curve is the supply curve, then yes. In some cases, that's not necessarily going to be true. Okay, but yeah, how we've been kind of talking about it, there you can link the two things together. But just keep in the back of your head if you go take another class that the producer, the supply curve isn't always equal to the marginal cost curve. There are going to be some reasons, like if you have externalities and other things, where it's going to change, and then it's going to be different from monopolies. Okay. Okay. Actually, and also that's only the case, right, when we have this too, right? Only when we have that. If we don't have average total cost equals the marginal cost, then it's also not going to be, definitely not going to be the case. But in this case, and a lot of times you make this assumption, then it is. Okay. Good question. Okay. Any other questions about this? Yeah, go ahead. Say again. Yeah, can I explain it again? Yeah. So the first thing that we need to figure out, because there are just a few steps that we can go through mechanically to find out the profits from monopolists. The first thing we need to do is determine what we still need to get. We know the demand curve, we're given it. We're given the marginal revenue curve. We're given the marginal cost curve. Okay, so those three things can help us get the marginal cost and the marginal revenue, get us the quantity. Okay, then once we have the quantity and the demand curve, we can get the price. Right, by plugging our quantity into the demand curve, that gets us a new price. Are we all good there? And then once we have those two things, the last thing that we need is we need to know what the average total cost is at our quantity, because then we take the price minus the average total cost, that difference multiplied by the quantity gets us profit. So we're not given the average total cost here directly, but this phrase right here that I underlined, there are no fixed costs, that tells us that the marginal cost is equal to the average total cost. Okay, how do we know that? Because we know what average variable cost is, we know what marginal cost is, and so if we think about those definitions and we think, oh, well, there's no fixed cost, so our average variable cost is our average total cost, and the only thing that's changing every time is our variable cost, so our marginal cost is equal to our average variable cost. That's kind of how I walk through and get it. But also, that's a little bit tougher to figure out right away. So once we get that, though, then we can just say, okay, price minus average total cost times the quantity. And that's how we get the rectangle. Okay? Okay. So for this question right here, whoops. The table below shows the demand curve faced by the monopolist. What quantity will this monopolist produce? So again, we need to know, to figure out what the quantity will be, we need to know the marginal cost and the marginal revenue. Okay, well, we're not given the marginal revenue curve. We are given the demand curve though, right? And we know that the marginal revenue curve is just going to be twice the slope of the marginal revenue curve. Did I say that? The demand curve or the marginal revenue curve is going to be twice the slope of the demand curve. So what does that mean? If this is the demand curve right here, then if I were to draw in the marginal revenue curve at a quantity of 2, we would have a price of 13. because the quantity of 1 has price of 13 for the demand curve. At a quantity of 4, the price would be 12. At a quantity of, oops, excuse me, doing this backwards here. At a quantity of 2, the price would be 10. At a quantity of 3, the price would be 8. At a quantity of 4, we don't know what the quantity is at 8. And at a quantity of 1, the price would be 12. Sorry, I just did it backwards. Okay, so what we're getting here is I'm hearing some whispers, so let me just draw it out here so we make sure we're all on the same page. This is the demand curve, right? So at 1, the price is what? 13. Okay, so the marginal revenue curve is saying, okay, at a price of, or at a quantity of 0.5, our price is 13. At a quantity of 1, our price, or at a quantity of 2, our price is 12. But for the marginal revenue curve, at a quantity of 1, the price is 12 because the slope is twice as steep. Okay. So where does the quantity equal the price? Or sorry, where does the marginal revenue curve equal the marginal cost curve? Well, we haven't gotten there yet, right? So a quantity of 4, we know that the slope now we can figure it out is going to be -2. So our marginal revenue is going to be 6, and then 4, and then 2. So at a quantity of 4, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's the profit maximizing quantity for the monopolist. So the answer is going to be B. Okay. Yeah, Christopher. Yeah, okay. So let me maybe slow down. It's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to draw out the demand curve based on this, right? Like everybody understands this is the demand curve. The table below is showing the demand schedule, right? And we've seen demand schedules in the past. So we have 11, 10, 9, 3, 4, right? 11, 10, 5. Okay, so I'm literally just drawing out the points on here. Okay, everybody following? Now the marginal revenue curve is twice the slope of the demand curve. Okay, for a linear demand curve, which we always have linear demand curves. So if we can figure out here the equation or even just the slope of this demand curve, then we can figure out the slope of the marginal revenue curve, right? Well, every time the quantity goes up by 1, the price goes down by 1. So the slope is -1. So the marginal revenue curve slope is -2, right? And so I can just draw in and plot all the same points, right? So I start out and I know, okay, at a quantity of 0, we have 14, right, for both of them. So then at a quantity of 1, the marginal revenue curve is 12, 10, 3, at 3, it's 8, 6, 4, 2, okay? So I just utilize the fact that we know that the marginal revenue curve has twice the slope of the demand curve. Is that helpful? Okay. And so that's what this question is trying to get at. Do you know how to get, if you're just given a demand curve, do you know how to get the marginal revenue curve? And it's like hitting at something from unit 1 as well, which is the demand schedule stuff that we've talked about, okay? And then finally, the last part of this question, it's like, well, do you know how to find the profit maximizing quantity? So it's like it's looking at a bunch of different things here. But I picked these 2 questions specifically because this is what some of the questions are going to look like when you move forward on, and you should see it on your problem set and on the final as well, okay? Okay. And there's definitely questions like this that you can go over in a sheet. Okay, so let's do one quick refresher of how to get Nash equilibrium for game theory. If we have a game. So last week we talked about oligopolies. We're going to finish up talking about oligopolies and talk about monopolistic competition as well. So in this example, we have Coke and Pepsi. Coke can choose a price for their, maybe this is like a can, like a 12-ounce standard can of Pepsi. They can choose a low price of 30 cents or a high price of 40 cents. Pepsi can do the same thing. So what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to find the Nash equilibrium. Okay, we'll talk about, is there a dominant strategy? And then we'll talk about this last concept, equilibrium cooperative. Is it cooperative? So don't worry about that if you don't know how to get that. But spend a few minutes, work on this with the people sitting next to you. See if you can figure out what the Nash equilibrium is. Okay. Okay, let's go over it. So, okay, just the first thing we need to remember is what is a Nash equilibrium? Nash equilibrium is where two best responses overlap in an outcome. So in this case, that means that we're going to go through and do our little underlining trick and see if one cell has two payoffs underlined, right? So, and this is just how I like to do it. If you found a different way that you'd like to do it, that's totally fine. But if I start as the Coke or the row player, and I say, okay, let's just assume for a second that Pepsi is going to choose 30 cents. Then what should I choose if they were to choose 30 cents? My best response would be to go 30, also choose 30 cents, because I would get a payoff of $8 million, which is higher than $6 million. More profit, the better. And if we did the same thing and we assume, okay, Pepsi chooses 40 cents, what should I do? I again should choose low 30 cents because I get $10 million. Okay. Then we do the same thing for Pepsi, and this is what's called a symmetric game. So I know right off the bat, they're also going to have 8 million and 10 million because their payoffs are the same. That's not always going to be the case, but just in the simple examples that we're doing, they are. So what is the Nash equilibrium going to be? The Nash equilibrium is an outcome, right? It's going to be 30 cents, 30 cents, and the payoff of $8 million each. Okay. Is there a dominant strategy? Does anybody remember what that means? Yeah, Maddie.
I might be wrong, but is it a yes? Because like the both regardless if everyone finishes for 40 or 40 days,
Yeah, that's the idea. Yep, exactly right. So dominant strategy says it doesn't matter what the other person is going to do. My best response is the same either way. So they'll both choose 30 regardless of what the other does. So that there's a dominant strategy for each of them. Something that you might be picking up on is if they both have a dominant strategy, that has to be a Nash equilibrium, okay, which should kind of make some intuitive sense, right? Is the equilibrium cooperative? The idea here is no, it is not cooperative. There is a Pareto improvement if they were able to figure out how they could cooperate, but we don't have any mechanism for that to work right now. They could both get 9 million by charging a higher price. The problem with that is I could say, oh yeah, I'll do the higher price, and then I'm just going to undercut you and go low, and I get 10 million, right? So there's no mechanism in place to punish each other. So it's what's called a competitive equilibrium. Competitive equilibriums are better for the consumer usually because you get lower prices, so consumer welfare is higher. Okay, any questions about this? This is the left, yeah. Yeah, so dominant strategy is a strategy where regardless of what the other player does, I choose the same, my best response is the same, okay? So in this case, it's saying, okay, Coke chooses 30 cents if Pepsi chooses 30. They also choose 30 cents if Pepsi chooses 40. They choose 30 cents no matter what. That's the dominant strategy for them. Yeah, Christopher. The answer is no. Cooperative. So the answer is no, it's not cooperative because there's a higher, like they would both be better off if they chose the high price, right? Because then they both get more money, but that's not what they did. They're competing with one another. They're choosing a lower price. They're fighting each other. Okay. Ooh, good question. I don't know if we can come up with okay, so let's say that instead of just playing this game one time, you play it twice. And the first time I said to you, let's cooperate. And if the one person doesn't cooperate, then I'm just going to go low next time as well. You see what I'm saying? If you created like a 2-stage game, but we're not going to do that as much. But on Wednesday, I'm trying to set something up where you guys might play a game and that might be cooperative. Does that help? Like we don't have an example that we can come up with unless we figure out a way where they can punish each other. No, but in this class, we're not going to show any examples where they are because it gets more complicated. But yeah, okay. I wouldn't worry too much about this last part for the tests, other than knowing if something is cooperative or not. Is just if they can both be better off, then it's not cooperative. Okay. Okay. So this is the last prisoner's dilemma example we're going to do. We're going to talk about monopolistic competition. Then we're going to get started on a different type of game and go through that. Okay, so monopolistic competition is a market structure where with features of both competitive markets and monopolies. One of the biggest, most important things to understand is and how it's different than a perfectly competitive market is the goods are differentiable. And what does that mean? Differentiable goods means that people might have different preferences for one good or over the other, but they tend to be substitutes for each other. Okay, they might not be close substitutes, but they have some degree of substitutability. Okay, so a Whopper at Burger King and a Big Mac at McDonald's have a very high substitutability. They also have very close prices. They compete with each other very closely. Okay. But in monopolistic competition, one of the main things that we care about thinking about is how products can differentiate themselves from each other. So you have differentiation by style or type. So that would be McDonald's, Whopper, or Big Mac or Whopper at Burger King. You know, McDonald's has the sauce, the secret sauce or whatever. I don't know what makes a Whopper, but some stylization, differentiation by location. So this might be that there's oh man, who's from the West Coast here? What's that place called? The burger place on the West Coast. In-N-Out, the fast food place. Differentiation by location. You have In-N-Out in the West Coast, and here you have, what's that really bad place called? Cookout. You have Cookout here. Don't know why, but those are differentiated by location, and then you have differentiation by quality, right? You can go to like Outback Steakhouse, or you can go to Stony River Lodge or whatever that place is next to the movie theater. They compete with one another, but obviously one is of a higher quality than the other. Okay. I know those were all food examples. I'm hungry also. Those are just the easiest ones to think of, but it doesn't have to be just food. In general, food is like one of the least interesting cases, but yeah, that's the idea. Okay. Yeah. Like location, you're saying the location is totally different. Yeah. That's a good question. Maybe that was a bad example, but I mean, so yeah, that might not be the best example, but like, let me like think of like a. Yeah, or you could think of like, trying to think of other globalized products. So rental car agencies, hotels.
Okay, so like one will be closer.
Yeah, it might be closer to you. Gas stations, kind of, although you could say they sell almost the same product, but gas stations. Yeah, so maybe I was just on the burger train, but yeah, probably. Yeah, car rental would be good, gas stations, hotels, those types of places. Yeah.
You remember the tennis question about the Indiana one? Would that be instead of?
Wait, what was the question? I'm sorry.
Question. So we did it.
Oh, Parks and Rec. Would that be an oligopoly instead of monopolistic competition? No, I think that, what was I trying to show? Yeah. I mean, I remember showing the example. So it depends on how you define the market. If we say the market for tents in Pawnee, Indiana, you might say it's a monopoly. If you say market for tents in Southern Indiana, you might say it's an oligopoly. Or if you're saying if you're allowing each firm to be a little bit different, you might say monopolistic competition. But I guess if I were to say tents in Pawnee, Indiana, I'd probably think, oh, it's a monopoly. there's one owner. But does that answer the question? Yeah, okay. Whenever there's one owner, monopoly, done, end of story. Whenever there's a few owners, but there's a reason why more aren't entering, that's an oligopoly. Okay. So yeah, product differentiation, that's one of the big things. Also in the long run, monopolistically competitive markets and firms cannot make profits. Okay, in the short run, they can, just like perfect competition, but they can't in the long run, okay? Okay, so let's talk about why that's the case. And then this is it. This is all that we're going to talk about from monopolistic competition. Not because it's not important, but just because that's all we really have time to get into, and we're going to need some more math to go deeper. So the market for some good is going to be given by demand, and then a marginal revenue, and the marginal cost curve. And then let's do. And then we also are going to need to care about the average total cost. Okay. So the idea with monopolistic competition is, in the short run, it's just like everything else. You choose this quantity, and you choose this price, and so you can have profits okay. In the short run, you can have profits. You can also have losses in the short run. You just would move the average total cost curve and the marginal cost curve up. Okay. If you have profits, positive profits or negative profits, in the long run, what happens is two things can happen. Okay. Because firms compete with each other, right? And because you can substitute, right? If I'm making a profit, a positive profit in the short run, then other firms will come in and they will have lower prices, or firms that already exist will lower their prices to try and get some more of your market. And what happens when the price of a substitute good goes down? Demand for your good decreases, okay? So we would see the demand curve shift in, okay? So, and that's going to happen, until we get this beautiful picture where marginal cost. Okay, let's draw this right. Until your average total cost curve exactly touches or crosses in some way your demand curve, and you have zero profits. Okay. Okay. So the first thing that can happen is demand shifts. We can actually have a second thing happen too, because in the long run, as more firms enter, you have to try harder to differentiate your product. And when you have to try harder to do something, that translates to having higher costs of doing that thing. So your average total cost curve could actually go up a little bit. So that's the second thing that could happen, is your average total cost curve could actually shift. Okay. Shifts down, or like it can be some of both, one or the other. Average total cost curve shifts up. Okay. Because you have to spend more money to try and differentiate your products. I don't know how much the book talks about the second part. I can't remember actually. I know it talks about the first part for sure, but either one of these things could happen. or sum of both, okay? And just losses, you just flip it, right? You are going, if you have losses, you might see firms exit, or you might try to raise your price. Excuse me, sorry. If you have losses, you're going to exit the market, and then the other firms, like other firms that are similar to you, are going to stay in, are going to have less competition. So the demand for their good will shift to the right, increase, and you'll get to zero profit again. Okay. Yeah.
The profit box, does that follow the average total cost curve, or is it a box?
Oh no, it's a box. Yeah, sorry, I sucked at drawing it, but it's a box. The reason why it's a box is because we take the average total cost at the quantity, right? We don't take the average total cost at each quantity. Does that make sense? Like the average total cost of this quantity is right here, ATC1. Okay. Okay. If you can ask me more about it if you want later too. Okay. Okay. Any more questions about monopolistic competition? Big overview. We care about product differentiation. Long run, no profits. Lots of firms, easy to enter, but they can set their own price and they face the market demand curve. So they have some monopoly tendencies and some perfectly competitive tendencies. Okay, yeah. Yeah, think about it for like every firm. Some of the firms are going to leave if they have negative profits. Okay, and the firms that are still left are going to have a higher market share. So the demand for their goods will shift to the right, increase. Okay. I know, like when we think about one specific firm, it's a little weird, but we're thinking about like all of the firms in the market. Okay. Okay, cool. So we'll review some of that on Wednesday too. Like we'll hit the like high points of it. I just wanted to go over it. The last thing that I want to do is I want to get started on this because weren't able to do the last recitation that I had. So I just wanted to do it with you guys in here, go over it. It's more game theory stuff. So we're going to spend the rest of the class working on this. So about 25 minutes or so. And you can work on the people. Yeah. No. Yes. Good question though. Good question. Yeah, because we still did all of our recitations that we could. We just because of I actually don't know what. Oh, we had the mental health day and we canceled recitation for 1 week. Okay, so we have two people, Dominic and Deckard. They've gotten into a bit of a disagreement and are now speeding headfirst towards each other in their cars. If neither swerve, they will certainly crash and damage their cars, but they get to keep their pride, giving each of them a payoff of -50. If both swerve, they both damage their cars, or they both don't damage their cars and get a payoff of 0. If one swerves but the other doesn't, then the one who swerved gets -100 because they're ashamed, and the one who went straight will get a payoff of 100 because they're superior. You might be like, whoa, what's going on here? So I have a video to motivate. Oops, I should probably. I have a video to. Yeah, I love that video because it's just like, I've only seen the first two, so to see what they've become like is pretty funny to me. I don't know why. Okay, so let's work through this in groups for the last 20 minutes. If we don't finish it, I'll go over it briefly on Wednesday. And I'll walk around if you have questions. Definitely feel free to ask. So draw the payoff matrix with the given information for Dominic and Deckard. Talk about whether anybody has a dominant strategy, and then if there are any Nash equilibrium or equilibria. And then could they be better off if they were allowed to communicate? This is just a think about question. So think about if somehow they could signal what they were doing in a way that would be legitimate, would it be better? And then the last question here, relate this back to the prisoner's dilemma, and then why is that important for oligopolies, which we've already talked about, so don't worry about the last part, okay? But go ahead and get started on this. The hope is that you get some practice drawing the payoff matrix and talking about it with the people sitting next to you, okay? Okay, let's go over part A, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So draw the payoff matrix, okay? So the first thing we need to know are who are the players. The players are Dom. That's his nickname in the movies. I think it still is. Does anybody watch the newest ones? Is it still, do they still call him that? Okay, perfect. And then Deckard. Okay. The next thing we need to know are what are their actions. They can swerve or what else can they do? Yeah. What did I say though? Swerve,
I said contact and sort knows who.
no swerve. Swerve, no swerve, contact. I'm just gonna say straight. Because when I learned this is called the game of chicken. In I guess in game theory and in the playground. And okay, so we got their actions. The next thing that we need to know are what are their payoffs, right, for each outcome. Okay, so if they both swerve, they both get what do we get? 0, right? Okay, if Dom swerves and Deckard goes straight, what does Dom get? Negative 100 because he's a loser. He lost, right? And Deckard gets 100 because he's the winner and he's the best. He's super brave. Okay, and then the same thing if they switch it around. And then if they both go straight, they get negative 50. Okay. So you might be like, oh, okay, this is going to be easy. What's the equilibrium? Blah, blah, blah. So does anyone have a dominant strategy? Yeah. Don't swerve, okay? Is the dominant strategy. So don't swerve or straight. Straight for both. Okay. Let's freeze right there, okay? So it's like, oh, straight is going to be the Nash equilibrium, whatever. That's super easy to think about. So let's talk about something a little bit different. What payoff would they need to get if they were to not have straight be a dominant strategy for both? So what I want you guys to do is I want you to go in and erase anything that you want, redraw this graph with them getting different, like a different equilibrium. So figure out what payoffs are needed to get a different equilibrium. I saw a couple of eyebrows raised. So if you have questions, just I can definitely come talk to you about it. Okay, let's talk about it. There are a lot of things that you could have done, but one that I think is interesting is, let's say that we switched these payoffs to be 101, 101. Okay. In that case, maybe you could come up with a story where, like, yeah, if you were to go straight and the other person swerved, you're brave or whatever. But if you both swerve, that shows how smart you are, and smart is better than brave or something like that. I don't know. In this case, what would our equilibrium be, right? We would have, okay, let's look at swerve. If Dom thinks that Deckard's going to swerve, he's going to swerve. If Dom thinks Deckard's going to go straight, he's going to go straight. And then vice versa. Deckard will swerve if Dom swerves, and Deckard will go straight if Dom goes straight. Oh, well, we have a problem here now, right? Sort of. We have two Nash equilibria. Okay, that's a little weird. Especially if we're trying to think about this as like a prediction. It's if we change it to have different payoffs, you can get two equilibria. How are we going to know what's going to happen? So in this scenario, something that I just want to kind of introduce to you guys, but we don't really need to get in depth on, is what if it's the case that Dom and Deckard, they just do this every single movie? Okay, I don't know, maybe they do, I have no idea. Maybe they did it in movie 5, and then in movie 6, movie 7. Maybe they double cross each other after they team up, and they do it again in movie 8. And they just keep on doing this game over and over and over again. And maybe they're like, you know what, I'm getting sick of ruining all of my favorite cars. And they start to mix it up a little bit. Sometimes they swerve, sometimes they go straight. It just kind of depends on how they feel that day. In game theory, there's this concept called a mixed Nash equilibrium. And if you go take more classes, you'll talk more about this and how you can kind of reconcile what's going to happen if there are two possible equilibria. Okay. That's all that I had. That's all that I wanted to go over today. So we finished early. I'll stick around if you have any questions. Otherwise, office hours, email me first if you're going to be there, or just come up and tell me right now, Jacob, I'm going to be there at 11. I'm going to be there at 11:30. That'd be good too. Otherwise, have a good day. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. We'll start some review on Wednesday. If on Wednesday you're like, if you know you would like to go over a certain type of problem, feel free to email me and I can try and fit it in if I have time. We might have time to go over some stuff. So, but yeah, I have some specific things I definitely want to go over on Wednesday. And then on Friday, we're going to have like a review session where you guys can just ask all the questions that you want. We'll go over things, okay?
Is there recitation tomorrow?
Yes, recitation tomorrow. What was your question?
Time is that on Friday?
Friday, it's gonna be in the afternoon again sometime. I don't know yet for sure. I'm still trying to get this room, okay? I'll try and find out by today, yes. The final's at 4 o'clock next Tuesday, okay? In here, okay? Yeah, so finals 4 o'clock next Tuesday, and if you have, for some reason can't make it, there's only one option for a reschedule. I will figure out when that is, but yeah, the finals at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. It'll be tough for you to get it rescheduled. If for some reason you can't make it and you know that right now, please let me know. Okay. All right, you guys can go. You're free to go. Have a good day. See you. Yep.
I will.
Yeah, see ya.